I'm Brickroad, welcome back to Metroid Zero Mission. The first two times I tried to record that line, I called the game Super Metroid Zero Mission. Super Metroid is of course a different game, and I'm an idiot. In this video, we'll be tackling Kraid. Kraid is the name of one of the two mini-bosses Samus has to destroy to open up the tentative final level, but it's also the name of the region of Zebes that mini-boss lives in, which I personally think is kind of stupid. In the original Metroid, the mini-boss lairs were just called Hideout Number 1 and Hideout Number 2, which is less stupid than just being named after the mini-bosses, but yeah, no, still kinda stupid. I mean, I see Nintendo's conundrum here. They didn't want to invent names for areas that technically already existed. When ZM came out, though, the boss areas already had names in popular use. Kraid lived in the Brinstar Depths, and Ridley lived in Lower Norfair. My preference would have been to just use those names, but for some reason nobody asked me. Because I skipped the power grip, I need to diagonal bomb jump to access some areas of Kraid. The real stickler in this room is the acid critter, who will respawn and continually screw up your bomb jumps. You can prevent that from happening by simply not collecting the pickup it drops. In Fusion, the pickups swirled around the screen and were troublesome to avoid, and if you didn't grab them, they would eventually rematerialize into a new monster. Reason number 275 why Zero Mission is superior. We're in this area of Kraid to power up some electric zip lines, which are fun to play with, but what really excites me here is the acid worm. Not the boss itself, that's a boring and easy fight, a notch or two above the likes of Spore Spawn, but rather how the world wraps around it. The layout of this corner of Kraid has three corridors stacked one on top of the other. The top corridor acts as the sole entrance and exit to the area. The bottom one contains the acid worm. The hidden middle corridor contains the power switch for the zip lines. The end result is the ability to enter the acid worm's room from either direction. If you come from the left, as most players will before discovering the hidden zipline room, the boss doesn't spawn and you just hit a dead end. You're forced to backtrack through what you think is a normal empty room, but once you activate the zip lines, you're forced to enter the acid room from the right, and then BAM! Boss fight. There's no actual choice to be made here. You have to do the zip lines, then the boss, in that order, but it draws a bright, clear line between your first and second run of the game. The first run is defined by discovery and surprise, a boss fight in a room you don't expect one. The second run is shaped just differently enough that you're able to apply what you've learned and see the game from a different angle. And I'm not saying I deserve a round of applause for that pretty pro wall jump right there, but maybe a golf clap might be in order. I suppose it's a little weird to spend the whole boss fight talking about map layout rather than, say, the actual boss fight, but this is an example of the Metroid series' best virtues when it's on point. The action aspects of the games, the jumping around, shooting bugs aspects, are really nothing special. Certainly not up to par with the Mega Mans and the cave stories of the world. What stands them apart is the way the world is crafted, how it forces you to observe patterns and puzzle out routes. This is part of my legendary dislike for Metroid Fusion. When you take away the creativity, decision-making, and thoughtful level design, what you're left with is a mediocre action game. The drawback to large, contiguous platforming world is that it can't create the same sense of danger and excitement that a short, one-shot Mario or Mega Man level can. Those kinds of experiences have to be created from the ground up, and Fusion simply isn't. Instead of starting with an action base and adding on from there, Fusion starts with an exploration base and subtracts until only the action remains. It doesn't play to the good God, Brickroad, get up on that ledge, thank you. It doesn't play to the strengths of its genre. That's a fate that Zero Mission thankfully avoids. So here's my proposal. Every time I make a boner out of myself, the way I'm doing in this little lava pool here, we're all gonna put a quarter into a jar. By the end of this LP, we should have enough capital to fund a care home for gamers abused by Metroid Fusion. Who's with me? Who am I kidding? Where would I even find a jar that big? Back on track. If Fusion is deficient for failing to build on its exploration premise, where does that leave Zero Mission? We've already seen a few of the interesting ways ZM builds itself up, and it's around this point where the game really starts creating its own identity. One of the ways it does this is its self-contained puzzle rooms, little set-aside sections of the game world where you have to analyze what pieces you have, then figure out how to use Samus's moveset to arrange those pieces into a configuration that gets you to the missile tank. The room we're in right now combines crumble blocks, speed blocks, ball cannons, rippers, and zip lines in a way that looks confusing at first, but eventually yields to a bit of ingenuity and experimentation. It's a satisfying little puzzle. It rewards your knowledge of how various game mechanics interact. It scratches a different itch from the more basic, what is that? How do I reach that? Kind of challenge from Super Metroid. It's like that one set of speed booster missiles in Meridia, only ZM has them in every area. It's not all sunshine and roses though, because ZM also employs the dreaded arbitrary lock and key. You'll sometimes see big blocks like that one that have a design on them that are only removed once you have the matching item. That's it. That's the mechanic. Door is locked, find matching key. It's the lowest common denominator in exploration games. You'll notice that Super Metroid uses this convention very, very sparingly, and Metroid Fusion uses it at every conceivable opportunity. In ZM's case, Samus will occasionally find items that she isn't able to equip with her current suit. Simply having the item, though, will allow her to break blocks bearing that item's symbol. In this case, the unknown item happens to be the space jump. The game doesn't want us to actually have the space jump yet, but it still wants to make sure that we pick it up before advancing, hence the arbitrary blocks. The unknown items don't add anything to the gameplay, but my sentimental side does have to admit they do help develop the story. Every unknown item, whether or not the player recognizes the item for what it is, serves to remind us that this is Samus when she's still wet behind the ears. An incompatible item described in an unreadable alphabet is a promise that later on Samus is going to level up and become the well-equipped, virtually invincible heroine that we all know and love. Wow, troll me harder, little crawly guy, good job. That is in fact what happens in a very memorable scene much later in the game. I get that sometimes a game is going to have to make concessions for the sake of its story, and I'm glad that ZM found a way to do it without uncooperative computers and elevator monologues. And I do understand how it's an improvement over Super, where the story vanishes after the prologue and only shows back up at the 96% mark. So anyway, here's Kraid. He's still Kraid. You shoot him in the mouth, and he eventually dies. Yeah, like I was saying earlier, the action elements in Metroid games tend to be lackluster, and that does include the boss fights. The presentation is usually great. Both of the worm bosses have demonstrated this, but the actual fighting part is not what the games are good at, and Zero Mission is no exception in that regard. Now once Kraid is done exploding and Samus is done with her derpy treadmill animation, she's gonna collect the speed booster, and I hate the speed booster in this game. I hate it with the burning fury of an angry sun. I hate it in a Kefka on the floating continent kind of way. Oh my god, is it bad. I swear I'll try to not spend the rest of this video talking about the speed booster, but please be aware that it is a distinct possibility. I hate how it looks, I hate how it sounds, I hate how long it takes to charge, but mostly I hate how it's automatic. This ability, which by the way was identical in Metroid Fusion, is the result of some developer saying, "Well, we have this classic ability we need to put in the game, but we don't have enough buttons on the controller. What's the least god-awful way to shoehorn it all in there?" The Super NES, where the speed booster was introduced, had enough buttons to dedicate one of them to dash. You use this button to regulate Samus' speed whether or not you have the speed booster. Locating that button was the solution to the infamous Brinstar Noob Bridge. The Game Boy Advance, for some reason I'm sure made perfect sense to a hardware developer at Nintendo, but defies all logic out here in the real world, has 2 fewer buttons. Samus had to lose some functionality, and so the dash button was put up on the block. By the way, my performance in this room means we all have to put like $1.50 in the boner jar. The solution, and I'm making little air quotes when I call it that, for Metroid Fusion was to make the speed booster automatic. Samus now has only 1 walking speed, which toggles over to super fast boosting speed if she has that item. This created 3 pretty serious problems for people who like to explore Metroid worlds. Boner jar, and boner jar. Bravo, Brickroad. Problem number 1, players no longer had a choice between walking and running. Walking and running have different uses in Super Metroid, and losing the option means losing some nuance that a lot of players appreciated. There's nothing wrong with a character with only 1 moving speed. You can just ask Alucard or classic Mega Man, but putting a high-speed power-up on a character without a dash button shines a pretty big spotlight. Problem number 2, automatically triggering the speed booster makes it a lot harder to run around the game world. The whole point of the power-up is that you're super fast and out of control, and while that feels real good in rooms like this one, usually you'd really just rather retain the control. We're going to need a second jar for every time I'm running down a hallway, trigger the speed booster where I don't want it, and then have to come to an abrupt stop to regain a comfortable trot. In Super, you could just let your thumb off the dash button for a couple seconds if you wanted to sprint for long distances without the speed booster, but that's impossible here. Problem number 3, it takes way too long to charge. This was probably a clutch to try to solve problem number 2, so that players wouldn't constantly get super speed when they just wanted to run down a hallway. The clutch doesn't really work though, and as a consequence, Samus needs so much room to build a speed charge that the ability is only really useful in certain designated areas. They build a few interesting puzzles around the concept of where can I charge my speed booster around here, but in my opinion it's just not worth trading away a power-up that was useful almost anywhere. Not really a problem, but still kind of irritating. Instead of accelerating smoothly from walk to run to gotta go fast, Samus just kind of trots along for a few screens and then immediately breaks the sound barrier. It's jarring and it feels bad, and it could have been avoided by either just finding a way to include a dash button, or alternatively just leaving the speed booster out. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, the medium we're using just doesn't support this idea we had. Metroid Prime had to chop or drastically alter several iconic power-ups to make them work in 3D, and it was the better game for the effort. It also managed to identify a power-up that didn't work in 2D, and then use it in some fun and clever ways, but an in-depth discussion about the Spider Ball isn't really in the scope of a Zero Mission LP, and I only have like a minute left on this video anyway, and I should probably find a new topic. Same topic. Iconic items that maybe shouldn't have been included. The charge beam isn't really that useful in Zero Mission. The 2 seconds I saved by leaving the screen early after killing the rock worm were worth more to me than having a chargeable shot anywhere in Kraid. So, yeah. Tangentially related topic, useful abilities that should have remained abilities and not been turned into items. Well, yeah, the long beam for one, but also the power grip, which is part of Samus's core moveset in Fusion, but is a doodad you have to earn in Zero Mission. If we'd had it, we wouldn't have had to do so many annoying diagonal bomb jumps to clear Kraid. Oh man, I wanted to say something about the little elevator scenes. I've got, what, like 20 seconds left? Okay. Non-linear storytelling is difficult in any video game, let alone a platformer designed to be completed in pretty much whatever order you want, but Zero Mission pulls it off with its short little animated vignettes, which I've already said are superior to Fusion's stupid monologuing, but I especially like how these scenes are designed to work no matter what order you see them in. Okay, I'm Brickroad, thanks for watching, bye!